So I have here with me Ruben, Josh, Hope, and Jeremy from Hope City Church and North Pointe Church here in Edmonton, and just wanted to interview them and have a conversation about what's happening here in the last couple of weeks with the COVID-19 pandemic, with a major shift in the way that we do youth ministry. I've seen what they've been putting out online and how they're engaging their students. I thought it'd be a great example or a great resource for you to just hear a conversation with the four of them, and see if you can steal any ideas, or if there's anything that they say or that they've been working through or struggling through that would be a resource to you as a youth pastor in Alberta or Northwest Territories. So why don't we get started? Let's start with Hope City with Josh and Ruben. I guess my first question to you guys is, what has been like one of the things you've been learning the most in the last couple of weeks as you've been navigating this new normal, or this temporary normal, we hope?
Probably, dealing with our demographic, all of us in youth ministry. Our bread and butter is with teenagers and preteens. And so obviously our first reaction, our knee-jerk reaction, is seeing how they process things. And so walking with them in life generally, you're in tune with what they kind of go through and process and think about. So I think with this whole COVID pandemic, it's more of like what's going through their minds, because, obviously going through now, putting everything online, content online has always just been there. They've been experiencing it. That's nothing new for them. It's a shift for us to put it there. But since COVID, there's just been kind of like an actual oversaturation of content online. And, just even all of us, this past Sunday, we probably all attended 37 churches. And so the content's oversaturated. And I think because of isolation, kids, what's going through their minds is not just boredom, but they're just craving community. And so because this is a disbalance now of oversaturation of content online to being isolated, not only physically, but just even emotionally and spiritually. And so I think what was going through my mind is that what's the balance of putting good content online, but also developing some good genuine community, that even though it's through a virtual screen, our students can be open and have that authentic community around them.
Cool. So I'll open this up to everybody. What are you noticing is kind of the perspective of your average youth student? Like, are they scared? Are they panicked? Are they not taking it seriously? And then I guess to kind of piggyback off of that, what is the spiritual sense you're getting? How are they relating this whole experience to a Jesus-based life? Are they blaming God or that type of thing? Has anybody noticed anything specific with that?
I think that the kids are just bored. They never really realized how much they rely on having people in their life. And some kids we're just, man, I love going out and seeing people after all. And you can knock your content and stuff out of the park, but it's just having a conversation with somebody and having just some community and connection with somebody. That's what people are craving right now. And if we can, just through growing community and knowing that these platforms are what people actually want to be on, it's not oh, I don't want to go on Zoom. It's no, they want to be on Zoom. They want to talk with people. And through that, you can actually see where someone is spiritually. A lot of our kids, I'd say, are just relying on God and just seeking God in this season, seeing what God's going to turn this into and how he's going to use it for our good.
I would say that I've seen some stages. At first it was oh, we're out of school, right? That initial moment of, usually they're excited, right, to be out of school. And then it was just oh man, this is real. I'm not going back. And you can just see that process of emotions happen where they're just going from oh yeah, it's exciting to be out of school, but then it's a realization that life is so different. What does this new normal look like? Oh, I can't be with my friends. Oh, my school's online. Oh, I'm homeschooled now. It's just all these things. So it's a journey with them. Every single week is a new emotion, right? So from when it started to conversations now, it's cool to see how they've kind of settled. They've kind of processed it more and more. Where they were the first day to now is a huge difference. And I can say that I've seen so many of them dig deeper in with their relationship with God, because there is less distractions.
I think it's funny that every kid that's ever made fun of a homeschooler now has like this crisis inside of their own identity because everyone is a homeschooler.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is the hardest thing in the last 3 weeks? What's been the biggest struggle or the most, like, as a pastor, like the biggest shift or the hardest thing to transition into?
Yeah, I think for this specifically, it's like for me, this has been hard because I'm not even a full year in being a youth pastor. So with this like new and coming alive, it's just like, oh man, now we got to figure out how to pastor people from a distance, from afar. And I think the hardest thing has been like finding content that's still meeting them exactly where they're at, but also continuing to have that like youth group community mentality where we find our students getting discipled. Because, you know, like I've heard some of our students that they say they're doing fine or they're doing this or that, but we don't really get to physically see how they're doing and interact with how they're doing. Because sometimes, you know, they come on a Friday, you can kind of read the situation, kind of read their words. You don't really get that anymore. And a lot of the times with my conversations with students, it's been like, I don't even know what to do with myself. And I feel like some of our students are just growing numb to all this. So it's a really hard balance to just like, how do we like really implement discipleship in this season? So, yeah.
What about at Hope City? What's been the hardest part or the hardest transition?
I'm in the same boat as Jeremy, like for 6 months and total job reconstruction, like creating content. I don't think we're very short on what to put out as content, but we don't want to put out so much stuff that's just like, we're just creating stuff to create stuff, like trying to really realize like, what do they need to hear? What works? What do we like? Phone calls and trying to reach out to students, like that's what's working the best. And of course our messages and stuff are hitting home, and we're changing a mentality from the fact that we used to go from like seeing how many people we had on church to now how many views we're getting on something. It's not taking those numbers and rating it against each other. It's just like, who are we impacting? And is that impact actually like altering how they view God? Are they growing still with God? That's kind of like my biggest struggle. Probably different, but.
I think the hardest thing as a pastor is that your bread and butter has just kind of just been removed from you. And so, like, you know, obviously, whether you believe it or not, you know, a lot of our job description relies on programming. We're considered pastors, but a lot of our engagement, metric system, conversation all happens through programming. But in a way, it's like kind of forced us, it's kind of been a reality wake-up call that, you know, reminds us of like what we are as vocations of youth pastors specifically, that, you know, we're not here to, and everyone knows this, that we're not here to do programming. We're here to, you know, make disciples and help these kids grow in their journey with God and grow in their spiritual maturity. And so now it's like, you know, the mission has always been the same. The methodology is now changed. And I think that's just been the hardest part, to transition from one spectrum to another on complete ends.
So that's great. So I guess for both groups, I would have the question of, what is kind of your general strategy right now? And maybe if anything has changed in the last, like, how, if it's drastically changed from when you first started, like 2 weeks ago, that'd be great to hear. But kind of what is the actual strategy right now between balancing content creation and just general community? Like, is there a percentage you can put on that? Is there something that you've been working towards to make sure that one happens more than the other? Or, you know what I'm trying to say by that?
I know when we first started, it was just like, you have like 60 ideas and you're like, okay, we need to get stuff out there, but it's been evolving. Like where we were on week 1 to where we are now, like it just like kind of gain a system, what works between balancing relationship and content and what is actually needed for kids and figuring out where that was. So like from where we started, it was like, oh, maybe we need to put out content 5 times a week, to now like, okay, we need it here, but this part of thing will be like a Zoom thing, or this is about relationship or small groups, or what does it actually look like? So I would say it's like evolving, and it's becoming more and more steady as the weeks go.
Yeah, for my perspective, it's like, it's balancing. Like, I think content is good to put online because that is, you know, that is your your voice. That's what you portray, and that's your teaching moments and stuff like that. How you process it is obviously done through the course of the week. So, you know, for us, it's like we build our week with, like, say for example, you know, Mondays and Wednesdays are like our content creation. So we work on videos, we work on YouTube stuff, just material to put out online. And then, you know, kind of the rest of the week is more of like, you know, small groups, one-on-one conversations, talking, but also reminding ourselves that, and I think this is probably the best time to do it, is also just parent engagement. And, you know, because everyone in the world is navigating this new normal, not just teenagers, but it's like you call your teenagers, like, hey, how you doing? Oh, good. Still trying to figure this out. Great. But also mom and dad is still trying to figure that out as well. And so, you know, I think the last couple of weeks, I've just been pushing myself to not just call kids, but parents as well, saying, hey, you've been on my mind. How you doing? Like, you know, because now they're just stuck with these kids at home. And so now their heads all very frantic, overwhelmed and stuff like that. And so whether you are a rookie youth pastor to a veteran youth pastor, I think everyone could agree that ministry moves at the speed of trust. And how you build your relationships and engagement with parents, whatever post-COVID will look like, man, it's money. Like, you'll just have your parents, they'll just be bought in. And so trying to balance, student ministry, student interaction, content, but also parents, because they will be your key to everything and success in youth ministry from my perspective.
That's really good. I think that's something I was writing about last week too. It's what a chance to build change in your pocket, or currency with parents. You don't have to be a youth pastor for more than a few minutes before you realize having trust, or as I put it, change in your pocket with parents. You got to cash that in at some point. You know, the first time the police get called, it's good to have some parents on your side. Not that you have to have the police called, but sometimes that will happen.
You would know, huh?
Oh, dude, too often. But yeah, if the parents like you, then the first time that there's a question in their mind, they'll choose to trust you. So I think that's great. And I think you're right, Ruben, like, to have the opportunity to build up trust in this time, like, there is no better time, because I can't imagine, could you imagine being stuck with some of your youth in one house for like maybe a couple months and not being able to like go to work to get away? Like, that's tough. So they're struggling. And the thing is that I think we forget as youth pastors sometimes, and I think this goes for children pastors too, but any next gen leader, is that parents are still the primary like faith builders in the house. And this actually has removed the excuse that sometimes pops up that, oh, the youth pastors needs to do it. But it's a partnership, and this is a chance to kind of leverage and build that partnership up. So I really like that. That's great. The other question is, like, as far as platforms for online, because here's the problem I see potentially happening. There's so many different platforms that kids are on. And if I'm a youth pastor who maybe doesn't know the internet that well, or maybe I'm a volunteer leader in my 30s, I'm not really tech savvy. I'm still just on Facebook, and I don't really know how to use it that well either. There's like 5 or 6, like, what's a TikTok? Is that a clock app? Like, what do I do with that? People might not know what all these things are, or might have some skewed perception from an article they read as to whether maybe TikTok, it's not safe, or Instagram is dangerous, or whatever. There's fear around all these things. What are you using, and what would you suggest for somebody who is just starting out, if they were trying to get online? What would be the bare bones from what you've experienced?
I would say that the bare bones, probably in regards to youth ministry, would be Instagram. But I would even take it a step further and kind of mirror what you're doing on Instagram for Facebook, to kind of go along with like what Ruben's saying, and partnering with parents, because most of the parents are going to be on Facebook. So if they kind of get an idea of what's going on, maybe through Facebook, it offers some comfort too as well, for the parents in understanding what their kids are viewing and seeing. So I would say Facebook and Instagram would be the 2 biggest heavy hitters in this, in my opinion.
And what about, I saw you guys at North Pointe, and I think you at Hope City were doing it as well. What has your use of Instagram Live been like, and what's the plan behind that?
Yeah, so with Instagram Live, we've kind of just made it super casual, where we don't really have a plan. We kind of just have an opportunity to interact and talk. and have our students ask questions. So we haven't had a whole lot of structure around how we've been utilizing Instagram Live, but we've just been creating a space for students to kind of interact with us, hear our voices, chat with us live kind of deal.
It's cool.
I've been having I'm grade 6 to 8, and like as far as like technology is getting earlier and earlier on stage, like newborns will get an iPhone when they're born in the future, but kids right now their parents still grade 6 and 7 don't really trust Instagram. So I don't really have a very good voice on Instagram towards my students that I'm trying to impact. So like Instagram's great for senior high, and we get tons of engagement. They get to choose when they go on, they get to use it. But if you get lower in age, like the restrictions, Instagram's dangerous, TikTok's dangerous. We like, honestly, back to email is the trick. And like, that's where Ruben came in, like talking to parents. The parents are the ones that are going to agree that, hey, you can go on my Instagram and use my Instagram. You can go on to Facebook. Like I'll get you to where you need to be, but I'm not going to trust you with it because you're going to end up somewhere you don't need to be. So that's kind of like the battle for us. Zoom, I think, is huge, because now we have a platform that everybody, school boards, everybody understands it. Parents trust it. They know how to use it, kind of. We're learning that. So like we're building like great platforms right now. Like I wish I bought Zoom stock before this whole thing, but it's things like this are going up, and using these newer platforms like this is a great form of communication for us. So
just don't let the parents know about the Zoom bombers and the hackers that have been going on, or else you'll have to find a whole new platform. Both of you guys, I know Hope City has, have you moved all your online or all your small groups onto online?
Yeah.
And what has that been like? Is that the exact same night? Have you just, how have you coordinated that? What's been positive? What's been difficult?
Yeah, so on North Pointe senior high side of things, we decided to do Wednesdays, because in the summertime we moved to Wednesdays, and we just want to keep that rhythm going right now. But so what we do is kind of like we've been mirroring what kind of a service night will look like at North Pointe for senior high. So we'll have everyone come on Zoom, being our youth leaders and our senior highs. And we'll have time for them to kind of interact with one another. And then we'll go into a time of a devotion led by one of the leaders. And then we'll go into breakout rooms where they can have their small group there. So it's all happening within the same Zoom party, so that everyone's kind of like unified under the same devotion, the same questions. So that's kind of how we've been like organizing it as of right now on our end.
we've done the same thing. We've Tuesday nights is still junior high, Friday nights is still senior high. We released the video on Tuesday. So example, like today we released a video at 6. Followed by that, there's a waiting room for Zoom at 7 o'clock. Everybody gets sent into their rooms. We do small groups. It still takes another 2 hours, like two and a half hours, same time limit that we'd get usually if we had in person. Just what we do is a lot different. And like that time's getting used up well. Same with Friday nights. Like the groups are awesome and kids love it. Like the conversation's real. And kind of like the thing people are realizing is you're talking like face to face, like you actually feel like I'm talking to all 4 of your faces. When you're usually in a conversation in a group, like one person's listening and there's another kid like ramming his head in the wall. So it's like everyone is engaged in a conversation. So we're seeing big wins on it, like having like a regular youth night, even though it's not regular.
For sure. And just to piggyback off of Josh, in terms of content, putting out there, like Josh nailed it in terms of small groups, that's what we're doing. And then for content, we're trying to like hit with depth. And so moving to one service a week has been a little bit of a challenge, because like the service, you're trying to hit the whole demographic of grade 6 to 12. And so that's been the challenge. And so we've kind of like offset that by, putting on Instagram on Mondays, like just a quick 2-3 minute devotional. But then on Thursdays, we're doing a more in-depth Bible study, going through the book of Philippians. And so for those who want like, more meat, then they can hop on in, bring their Bible and kind of journey with us. And then Saturday is just more like not serious content at all. So just trying to hit all spectrums of like seriousness, depth, width, just random funny stuff. And all those things can be talked about in small groups as well. It's like, hey, did you see this? Did you see this? What do you think about it? And hopefully it can kind of create conversations.
I've seen a lot of screenshots shared on you guys' social media on both of yours and other churches as well. And it seems like when I see Zoom small groups happening, that they're highly attended. Like it doesn't seem like there's that much trouble getting kids. And I think it goes back to what you guys were saying earlier, in the sense that they're so desperate for community. We're starting to see an uptick in attendance for smaller or mid-sized churches that actually, or I guess it'd be smaller, but churches of 100-ish or less that have moved, instead of doing a YouTube church, they're doing Zoom church, because they can see each other, because they're engaged. I think we're starting to see the desperation for community, and I think that you guys are leveraging that and really hitting that on the head. I guess last question before we wrap up, I'd like to ask it of each one of you if possible. The question I have is this: what is something you've learned or have adapted in the last couple of weeks during this COVID crisis, whether it's by going online or something that you've changed in your philosophy, that when this goes back to normal, whatever that looks like, whenever we go back into being available to go into physical spaces, that you want to bring back with you? So maybe to reword it, what's something you've learned in the last couple of weeks that you want to continue that you weren't doing before when we go back to physical spaces? It's not an easy question.
Yeah, for me, I think it's just like, I don't think it's like something that I've learned out of the blue, like completely, but it's just more of like a wake-up call and reinforce like this is it, and this is what you need to push for. But it's just a power of intentionality. Just even some discussions with my small group leaders, moving away from just doing a mass group text message, to individually connecting with everyone. And I think now that we've removed a massive part of our daily lifestyles, our kids are just feeling very vulnerable. And even though we can look at it as a disadvantage, it's a huge advantage for us pastors because we have a clean slate. And so the power of intentionality, meaning like that personable text, personable phone call, letter, whatever you want to do. And so I think like hitting home with that one, even though we have groups of whatever, it reminds the kids that, I don't know what's going through their mind, but to remove the stigma that our kids aren't just numbers, but they have names and they all have stories. And so just trying to hit the intentionality and also just building platforms for families. I think that's been a huge one too, because we're so focused on programming for our kids and kids only, but that parent communication just has to be top notch as well.
Anybody else got anything?
I'd say like being prepared for change. In my many decades of pastoring, I've gone through lots of seasons of change, but the fact that you have to change so quick and like completely opposite, but in that change, realizing that things might change, but your job to pastor, to not even your job, your life to pastor someone, to pastor people doesn't change. And like Ruben was saying, the ability to connect with people and really reaching out and seeing how they're doing, and like really forcing us to communicate with people in ways that we normally wouldn't, not just being a programmer, but being a pastor to people. That's kind of been like the thing that stuck with me going forward from this. And when we have to get back to programming and recreating and making every week in and out happen, not forgetting about the people, like either 160 hours a week that they're not with you, right? So just kind of that sharing of the time and knowing that, yeah, being prepared for change is something I'll take with me.
I think for me, the constant thing that has been reminded every single day through this process is our heart is for kids to know that God loves them and they are loved. And that can look so different in this scenario, so different in programming, so different, but the message is the same. And that needs to be our heart no matter what the season is.
Man, I've been learning so much, so I'm just trying to narrow it down here. But I would probably really mirror what Ruben was saying with just the intentionality is because we can get so caught up in programming where it's just like you don't really think about students' home life as much. It's like wonder how that student's doing. And like, this has caused us to just look at all of our students and all their home lives and check up on them. And I want that to be the new norm moving forward in whatever season we find ourselves in. So yeah, I agree with that.
That's cool, guys. I think if I could throw my 2 cents in there on that, what I've kind of been learning is a little bit, it mirrors what you guys are saying, but even the idea that some of these cool technologies and tools that we're using for this specifically and across the board, like Zoom has been around for years. Like, we could have been doing Zoom groups like, oh man, like they can't come from 7 till 8:30 on Tuesday. What are we ever going to do to connect with them into a small group? Man, I wish there was a way. But these things have been in front of us forever, and it's taken necessity and removal of something for it to open our eyes that there are tools that, the medium isn't the message. The mission doesn't change. The medium, delivers the message. But we have so many different ways, and I think sometimes we've gotten so caught up in this is how youth has looked forever. This is how, like, all youth groups, there's not a huge difference between what they look like in the last 20 years. Like, maybe better lights, maybe cooler, better dressed, in my opinion, or whatever, dressed youth pastors, or whatever, like the games and the technology, and that's all kind of evolved, but it's a very similar feel. But the tendency in all levels of ministry is just to get stuck into a pattern. And I think that this has taught us that there's all these different ways we can do it to reach more people. And we probably need to, like, just be intentionally looking outside of the box more than we did before. In 5 years, Zoom won't be the coolest thing. We'll probably have some sort of hologram virtual meeting room where we put on our headset and go into VR. And I didn't think about that till right now. And I think that sounds like the coolest thing ever. I don't think that will ever replace and make an in-person meeting obsolete. But I think that there's so many cool ways, if we think really creatively, that we can engage people that otherwise wouldn't. So that's been my takeaway. It's been awesome to see you guys, change and grow from a distance, from just watching your social media. And I'm sure that in 3 or 4 weeks, we'll look back at what we're doing now and be like, man, we know so much more than we did. This is always, going in a different direction every couple of days, it seems. Hopefully we're kind of heading into the peak of this, and we'll start to see some positives coming out. But I know my prayer for our district and for the church in general is that this is a wake-up call. It's a horrible thing to have to do it, but I think, and I don't just believe, I know that the church, youth groups, young adults, across the board, just church in general, we're going to come out of this stronger than we ever were before. And with better equipped, more like you're saying, more equipped to change quickly, to adapt, and a better perspective of the mission that we have, that we're called to as pastors. And I think, like what you were saying, Ruben, of what we're called to be, to just what the mission is to be a pastor, that across the board we can achieve it no matter what. Frankly, you could get rid of the internet now, and I'm sure it would be incredibly hard. We would find a way to pastor. We'll do it. Doesn't matter how hard it gets. This is what we do. We're outward bound. We want to disciple. We'll find a way to do it. I'll scrape and claw till my fingers are bloodied to get to where we need to go. And I know that's the heart of you guys as well. So, is there anything else you guys want to share? Any crazy, awesome resources that you want to promote? You guys got a blog you want to share? A podcast you've started? Clothing line? What else do youth pastors do? Good to go. Awesome. Well, if you guys do develop a clothing line, let me know and I'll promote it. Awesome. Well, this has been great, and we'll continue to do series of these. And if you guys have, actually, let's do this. If you guys have, if anyone listening has any questions, do you guys just want to state your emails?
Yeah, I'm just josh.m@hopecity.ca. You can find us on our website. Me and Ruben too.
Yeah, you can find us at np.church. My email is jbarry@np.church, different from Jeremy at np.church.
Sweet. All right, so you can find them at hopecity.ca or NP, so North Pointe, np.church. So if anybody has any questions or wants to hear more about what you guys are talking about, feel free. I know that all these guys would love to chat with you and to help you along if you have any questions. All right. Well, thanks everybody. It's been great, and we'll catch you next time.